Do you guys have a phone?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me an experience that you guys have had with your phone.
Like what kind of experience?
Have you guys ever been on your phone and you spent like 10 hours on your phone and you're just scrolling through social media and you feel like you wasted your life, felt unproductive, didn't really do anything, kind of irritated, you didn't spend time on doing homework, you're like, shoot, I shouldn't have done that.
Yep.
Have you guys ever felt like that?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's why I don't like phones.
exactly. And have you ever had the thought of saying, you know what, I'm gonna restrain myself from my phone and I'm gonna use that to spend more time on myself, more time on things that I care about, spend more time on things that I'm more passionate about. Have you guys ever had that thought?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you look at a phone, it's not really good or bad. It's neutral. But the way that we intend to use our phone is what causes the unhappiness. So the way that I view sexuality is the way that I use my phone. A phone is neither good or bad. It's the way that we intend to use a sexuality is neither good or bad. It's the way that we intend to use our sexuality is what causes unhappiness. However, you know those moments when someone's watching TV for too long and you get a little bit irritated at them? Now, we're not here to judge them. That's their decision, and what you're doing is you're almost projecting your form of unhappiness onto others. So we're not here to judge sexual behaviors. We're not here to judge the way that you use your sexuality. We're just saying some behaviors are going to cause more unhappiness and some behaviors are going to make you more happy. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So there are different levels of consciousness as to how we experience our sexuality. Consciousness is how we perceive, it's how we process the world, it's how we think about the world, it's how we assess the world. For example, when you're in the consciousness of fear, it's a little bit different than when you're in the consciousness of courage. Yes? The way that you assess people, the way that you view people, the way that you interact with the world is much more different than when you're when your dominant state is fear and when your dominant state is courage. Yes? Okay, so that's what consciousness is. So there's different levels of consciousness as to how we experience our sexuality. And depending on these different levels of consciousness is going to be dependent on how happy you are as a person. So for example, let's take the level of consciousness of guilt and shame. For example, you're being called a slut. There's a level of shame and guilt associated to that. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Or let's say you told yourself, I'm not going to masturbate today, and yet you do. There's a little bit of shame that you did it, but you can let it go. You don't have to be in this state of guilt all the time. It's in that one moment. It's in that one instance. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Or you have a person that is homosexual, and they're having a trouble admitting to their parents, hey, I'm homosexual. That's the consciousness level of guilt. Now, above that, we get into the consciousness level of hopelessness with our sexuality. So hopelessness is more of the feeling of being lonely, not having a person being in your life. You need validation. You want someone to validate that you're good enough. So you resort to your sexuality as a means to receiving that form of validation. For men, it's more of, I'm not getting laid right now, I don't have any girl in my life, that means I'm lesser of a man because I don't have women in my life. That's what it is like for a man. So there's a lot of different conditions of hopelessness, but these are the ones that most people relate with. The next level of consciousness, and all these levels of consciousness, what you're going to recognize if you're intuitive enough, all of these levels of consciousness have an energy attached to it. There's an energy level to it. So when you feel hopeless, you kind of feel like this. When you feel guilty, you're kind of like this. The next level is the level of desire. Now, we're not talking about the desire to help people, the desire to make the world a better place. We're talking about that wanting, craving, and needing. Are you guys all familiar with that? The feeling of wanting and needing and craving. So this level of consciousness is insatiable. It just wants something outside of ourselves on a constant basis. Okay? The next level of consciousness would be anger. So usually that stems in the form of someone's cheating on you. How could you do that? You're wrong, etc. There's a lot of heat going on. The next level of consciousness is pride. This is where you see advertisements, where women have a tendency to flaunt their sexuality in a way to manipulate and to kind of get what they want, right? So you'll see this with hamburger commercials where there's like a really beautiful girl eating a hamburger. It has nothing to do with the hamburger, but they're using that sexuality to be able to get what they want, right? Then there's levels of consciousness where there's acceptance about your sexuality, and then there's levels of consciousness about being at peace with your sexuality, all right? So we're gonna be talking about the dog real quick, okay? So who wants to pretend that, actually I don't really want to pretend that you guys are a dog, to be honest, because that could be totally sexist, to be honest. Who wants to just be a dog, but you don't have to be like a dog? Who wants to practice that? Okay, perfect, okay. So you want to be right over here?
Okay.
Okay, so you're a dog. So we're talking about the level of consciousness of desire. That's what everybody understands. It's that wanting and craving and needing, that's that urge, that's that irritation that you don't have it. You just want it. It's insatiable, right? So what happens is that, let's say I'm peace, right? I'm just my inner peace. And what happens is this, as this dog is barking at me, just say like ah, okay, I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I need to feed my dog because it's barking. I just want it to stop. I just want the urges to stop. I just need to release, right? So I feed my dog. And then what happens? You go over there. And then I can finally be at peace. This is where you get a state of orgasm, a state of euphoria, a state of ease. You finally get a sense of peace, right? But what happens right after that peace? Comes back again. It comes back again, right? So what happens is that I keep feeding this dog, and then you go again, and then I'm at peace. Rough. And if I do this enough times, I start believing in the idea that happiness is in feeding my sexuality. That's kind of an odd thought. Happiness is in feeding my sexuality? No, wait. This dog is what's causing all the disturbance. This dog is what's not allowing me to experience the peace that's already within me. If the dog is disrupting that, why am I thinking that if I feed the dog, I'm going to be happy? Because what if instead of feeding the dog, I just let go of you? I just let go of you. And then what happens is that now I don't need to have this dog continue disrupting me and interrupting my peace and happiness. And then I can just fully feel at peace with myself. So this is where the idea of celibacy comes in hand, okay? Guys have a lot of different interpretations and points of views about celibacy. They see it as a form of suppression. They see it as a form of that's not healthy, that's extreme, that's like religious, etc. This is why I'm doing it. Come back. The reason why I'm doing it, celibacy is just my way of saying I'm not going to feed the dog anymore. That's all it's saying. So that way the dog doesn't feel always insatiable. The dog isn't out of control all the time, because as I feed you more, right, you almost become more uncontrollable, right? You just come more often. I don't know when you're going to come. You just come more often, and you tell me, you feed in thoughts inside of my head that aren't true, etc. It can get very manipulative with these thoughts. So what I do, I just say, you know what, celibacy, I'm just not going to feed you anymore because I've fed you enough. I've already explored this area of feeding you, and I've recognized I'm unhappy with it. It's just like the phone. I've already explored this area of social media for 10 hours straight. I recognize that, I'm not that happy with it. So I'm just going to explore this area. So it's not suppressing or showing you like, oh, you shouldn't be that way. It's just saying that if you've already explored this side and you've felt unhappy, okay, let's go on another side. Okay, so that's what celibacy is for me. So In my journey, I experienced very dark, actually not dark, but I experienced levels of consciousness of hopelessness with sexuality. And I'm gonna be sharing some messed up stories about myself in the process. So remember when I said, when you feed the dog enough times, you recognize that you start believing in the false notion that sexuality is what's going to make you happy. So
False prophecy.
yeah, it's a false fulfilling prophecy, etc. In my terms, it's seeded a belief inside of my head. Every time I feed my sexuality, that's my main form of happiness. So you know how when people, now not to be religious again, but you know how when people believe in God, right? So when they believe in God, there's almost this extremity, there's almost this devotion to their God, right? So because they have a devotion to God, there's almost a form of happiness that they get with it, right? Or to some extent, right? Okay. So think of this as like, okay, now I'm almost viewing sexuality as my God. I have to keep feeding my God in order for me to be happy. So I'm almost going to resort to very extreme behaviors. So now as I express these extreme behaviors, I want you guys to look at yourselves, right? Because these behaviors are very messed up. You can laugh about it, you can joke about it, but they're very messed up, right? So look at yourselves, look at what's messed up within yourselves as I express about this story. So I'm under this belief that sex is gonna make me happy. So if that's my belief, if that's my perceptual reality of the world, if that's my level of consciousness, there's almost a sense of hopelessness. And usually when a dude's hopeless, right, you're kind of unattracted to him, right? Right, yeah?
Yeah.
So the dude's thinking to himself, like, I'm hopeless, I really want a girl, but he's not recognizing that level of thinking is actually repulsive and actually doesn't allow them to get the girl in the first place. So the hopelessness doesn't actually serve them. It's actually a very impractical way of thinking. So I'm thinking to myself, I really want a girl. I don't have a girl. I haven't experienced getting laid before. So I was a virgin. I haven't experienced a sexual experience before. So I really wanted to know what it was like. So you resort to pornography, you resort to other videos to just get a sense of what that experience was like. But that sense of what that experience was like, that was extreme for me. I really wanted it no matter what, right? No matter what. I didn't care. I let the dog do the thinking for me. So here's what's sad. I remember one time I got my dog and I wrapped my dog in a blanket, completely covered in a blanket. I put it on my bed and I humped my dog. That's when you're in the consciousness level of hopelessness and believing that sex is going to make you the most happiest person ever. You resort to those means just because you want to experience what it could potentially be like, so you can simulate that experience for yourself. Now, if you look at the thinking itself, it's like, oh, you know, like I could kind of understand, but that behavior itself, it's repulsive. What? Why would you do that? Are you that deranged? But that's what happens, is that when you let the dog do the thinking for you 24/7, 365, as much as I did, the behaviors start becoming more distorted. Okay? And these are also my most messed up areas, so these are not the full context of my personality. I'm going into the most unacceptable areas for a reason, okay? And there's a reason why we keep these things taboo. There's a reason why we keep these ideas behind closed doors. Because how often do you have a conversation about every sexual thought that you've had with your friend? Not a lot. So there's a reason why it's behind closed doors. And this is why I'm kind of breaking those closed doors a little bit, okay? Now here's another messed up thought. Actually, another messed up behavior. Who's ever had a messed up behavior before?
Yeah.
Right? In your own subjective experience, who's ever had a messed up behavior? Yes, yes, yes? Everybody is a yes?
Yeah.
Okay, right? So now there's a sense of, oh shoot, we're all kind of in the same boat here. Because a lot of us will just look at me and we'll be like, oh, he's separate, he's different. But if you really look at your psychology and if you look at what you've been conditioned by, I was conditioned by the internet. My parents didn't teach me how to be social or anything like that. My parents didn't teach me anything about that. So I relied on the internet for my main source of information. And the internet can program ideas inside of your mind that aren't true and that aren't the best for you. I was never grown up in like super religious or anything, so you don't get the ethics side of it, of life a little bit. So I'm just like, I'm just gonna believe what the internet says. And then as you start getting more into it, boom, you get slammed. Okay, here's another sad story. You guys, after me talking about these stories, you guys are gonna be like, oh my gosh, this guy needs help. I'm sorry. Okay, but look at yourselves. Use me as a mirror instead of being like, this guy needs help with this guy needs help with this. Use me as a mirror to look at yourself. Use me as that. Okay, this guy is able to go this messed up. Use me as a mirror. There was one time, and these are years back, 4 years ago, but sometimes messed up thoughts will appear even currently, right now, in this day. So it doesn't, just because it's way back doesn't mean it's not relevant, right? So one time I was at Home Depot and I have a blanket on me. And what was really sad is that I see a woman pass by and I have a blanket on me. Guess what I did? Exactly. I masturbated as I see the woman pass by. So this is believing in the thought. So what happens is that as I started believing the dog, I'm not looking at the full assessment of the situation. I'm not thinking about empathy. I'm not thinking about what that person may think. I'm not thinking about authenticity. I'm not thinking about that. I'm just thinking about feed the dog so I can get my happiness. That's all I'm thinking about. That's what happens, is that when that belief is implanted inside of your head, if I continue feeding that dog, I'll be happy, right? As I'm saying this story, what are you guys thinking? How do you guys feel?
Why didn't you just like go to a strip club or pay for like a sex worker?
So,
An escort?
yeah. So of course. So I'm going down to my messed up areas. There's actually a lot of like normal, like easy stories that I can talk about, like going to a strip club and all that stuff. Like I actually like went to a strip club one time. Like those are the normal, easy stories that I could talk about. But there's a reason why I'm going into the more taboo stories. Because again, these stories are not a complete reflection of my personality. There's a lot of aspects of where you're just like, oh, but these are like the one instances that I found the most extreme about myself. Those are the one instances, okay? So I did go the route of like picking up girls or something like that. So that's another area. I picked up girls. I talked to more girls and I tried to get girls' numbers. I went down that route, etc. But there was still an unhealthiness that was going on. So there were some normal things that I did to get laid, and there were some unnormal things that I did that I could do behind closed doors that no one would know in order for me to just get what I thought was happiness, what I thought was my peace, right? Okay. So the next story that I want to share to you guys is the story of the consciousness level of almost desire. Desire is almost objectification that's happening. You objectify people, you see people as a piece of meat, etc. And what happens is that the dog almost becomes uncontrollable. Especially when you're a teenager, it gets really uncontrollable, right? So here's one other messed up story that I can give to you guys. Again, this is very messed up, but there's a reason I'm going deeper into it. The other story was there was one time I'm play fighting with the baby and I'm just play fighting with them. But what happens is that they start jumping in my midsection area and my body got stimulated by that. And now I have enough consciousness to recognize that and disidentify from that and be like, no, that's no, right? I have enough consciousness to say that. Some people don't, but I had enough consciousness to say that. So it's just like when a dude, it's just like when you hump your bed or when you hump your pillow, you can get stimulated by that inanimate object. Or so as I started expressing that story to my friends, I got, as I started expressing that story to my friends, they said, dude, you're just hormonal, like you can get stimulated by anything. So that's okay. Bye, Mary. Bye. Okay. You got to go to class, right?
I did my lab.
All right, peace. Okay. So you got stimulated by that. And then I asked another guy, and he said to disidentify from your thoughts. That's what he said. So have you guys ever had a messed up thought before?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Does anybody want to share a messed up thought or no?
I mean, I used to be suicidal, so.
Exactly. But
Oh, sorry. I for some reason see like my friends and family in like the worst possible situations ever, like near-death situations.
yeah,
And I wonder, why am I doing this?
yeah. So you almost
Like,
see them
I
as a
see
form of
them-
death, right?
Yeah. It's weird.
You guys can leave at any time, so don't even worry. Don't feel obligated to stay. Any messed up stories? I can share some of like other messed up stories that people had, like some. But anyways, let's say like you know those moments where you're just like walking in the grocery store, right? And you get that random thought inside of your head, oh, I can steal that,
Yeah.
right? That's a messed up thought. But what we learned is to disidentify from those thoughts. So same with me. I learned to disidentify from my thoughts. So for example, let's say, you want to be the dog once again? So in that situation, the dog was barking. It was uncontrollable, right? Now, most people would identify with their sexuality, identify with their biology, identify with that urge, and be like, oh, that's who I am. And then boom, I get that thought inside of my head, oh my gosh, I might be a pedophile. Holy shit, right? But I want to, have you ever seen a situation where there's this guy named Wim Hof who swims in the Arctic Ocean, right? So biologically, that doesn't make sense. You want to go back? You want to go back? Biologically, that doesn't make sense that he's swimming in the Arctic Ocean. Doesn't make any sense. Have you guys ever been in a cold shower before? Now, some of you guys identify with your body, identify with the physical sensations that go through your body, and they're like, heck no, I'm not going to go in the cold shower. I'm going to freaking leave as fast as I can. I'm going to get sick. I don't want this, da-da-da-da-da, right? That's what the mind will tell you. Those are the thoughts that it will tell you. But some people, you'll recognize, maybe you'll look at dudes or something, or maybe you look at friends or something like that, or maybe yourself, you've seen that, where you go into the cold shower and then you just be with it. You just don't identify with the coldness, and you're almost able to get into the present moment, and there's almost this new energy that comes up as you're able to stay in that cold shower, right? So instead of identifying with the thoughts of resistance to it, instead of identifying with the body, I started accessing something that was inside of me, a peace that was inside of me. So instead of identifying with the urges that took place in that situation, I disidentified from it and recognized there was a peace that was inside of me, right? Does this all make sense for you guys so far? Identification and disidentification?
Yeah.
So these were the lower levels of consciousness that I experienced with sexuality. Now, what I want you guys to be able to go into is I want you guys to be able to go into the most unacceptable aspects about your psychology that you don't have to express in person, but personally for yourself. The most unacceptable aspects about it. Maybe it's in the form of sexuality, or maybe it's in some other area. Maybe it's the form of your irrational anger, or maybe it's in the form of your irrational fears, or maybe it's in the form of your irrational guilt and shames and feelings of being better than people, etc. Like, for example, who's ever had the thought of not being enough? Everybody. But the only difference between a really messed up thought and the thought about not being enough, both of these thoughts are false, but it's easier to identify with not being enough than a messed up thought. Yes or no? Okay. So go into the areas of what is most unacceptable about yourself. And then, are you guys cool with going into a circle? Okay, peace out. Are you guys cool with going in a circle? Okay. Okay. And then if you guys can, take hands. Is that cool with you guys? Okay. And I want you guys to imagine sending unconditional love to the most unacceptable aspects about yourself. All those messed up thoughts that you've had, etc. All those thoughts that were inconsiderate about how other people felt, etc. If you can send a level of unconditional love to that. Maybe laugh about it. Maybe have a sense of humor about it. You're like, oh, wow, I can't believe I had that thought. Wow. Don't take yourself too seriously, because when you take yourself seriously, that's when you have the highest tendency to judge yourself. Unconditional love for yourself. Okay, move back. How did you guys feel? Light? At peace? Right? So that peace, there were no urges that took place. That peace was already within you guys. That peace is what you can already access. So that peace is what we're trying to achieve. But we think that peace is outside of ourselves, that it's within the sexuality of another person. But that peace that you're truly looking for, that happiness that you're truly looking for, was just through authentic connection and authentic realizing that we're all the same as people, right? So that's the main achievement with this energy. We're in a state of peace. And that's the main thing when I'm celibate. I'm not letting the urges tell me what makes me happy. I'm letting myself tell me what makes me happy and to be at peace. Do you guys have any questions? Do you guys have any anger that you guys want to express to me? How wrong I am as a person and how stupid I am as a person?
You're not wrong.
Thank
You're
you.
wrong once, but you've changed.
Thank you.
You see that as a bad side that you had. That's something that you did that was unacceptable, and
Yeah.
you made yourself better because of it.
Yeah. It was almost an antagonistic part of my story. I used something so dark. What you don't acknowledge doesn't get healed. So if a lot of people have a lot of things behind closed doors, a lot of people, but a lot of people don't acknowledge it. So it just kind of goes away and they continue that habitual pattern. So a lot of people will see this as you need help. But if you're acknowledging it, oh my gosh, wait, no, you're actually most likely to be healed and change and go up in this direction. Yes or no? Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, what were you about to say?
No, I was asking that what made you like realize that what you were doing wasn't right?
Because when you're intuitive, and I know women are very intuitive, you guys can recognize subtle emotions that go through your body, subtle energy levels. Our levels of consciousness carry different energy levels. Some energy levels weaken us physiologically, and some energy levels make us feel better. So the energy level that we experienced in those holding of hands thing, that was a high vibrational energy level that we experienced. And imagine if you were to feel that all the time, your perception of people changes, your way of looking at people changes, your understanding of people changes. But let's say you're in the energy level of anger and irritation and just wanting to get this over with, right? If you're in that level of consciousness, your way of perceiving about the world, the way of you assessing the world becomes much more different, and the way that you feel about yourself physiologically goes weaker. So when you're very intuitive about what energies are being run through your body constantly, you can navigate which energy that you're going to try to achieve and which energy that you want to let go of, right? So that piece that we created, that's the energy that I want to try to achieve. And the other energy, the energy of irritation or wanting and urging, that's the energy that I can say, you know what, I want to let go of. Some people will call it biological, sexual urges as biological, as evolutionary, etc. I'm not denying science, and plus people talk about like prostate cancer, etc. and all that stuff. But what I'm saying is that don't use science as a means to indulge in that behavior if you've had unhealthy thoughts and if you've seen It's almost like saying, you know, going 5 hours on your phone is healthy. If you've personally experienced your phone as being unhealthy for you, make that decision for yourself and don't let science tell you what to do. Make that decision for yourself. Intuitively recognize that within yourself. Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
Are you implying that people can achieve a higher level of peace if they abstain from sex?
So this gets mixed up with, it's almost like I've been eating cookies for the past 5 years, so I'm going to be celibate and restrain myself from sex and restrain myself from those cookies for those amount of years. I feel like, yes, from my personal experiences, you can receive an amazing amount of peace through the process of celibacy. But I don't know if it's practical for all of you guys. But if you guys have seen the devastating results that your sexuality has brought you, why not explore a different area instead of continue exploring this realm? That's anything else to expand on that? Okay, good. Yeah.
So I know personally for myself, I don't have sex for that release.
Yeah.
I have sex to build the emotional connection with my partner.
Exactly.
What's your thoughts on that?
Beautiful. So the reason why I was celibate is because sometimes, this was for me, I would get sexual with the person a little bit too fast, and I wouldn't be able to evaluate their character. It's almost like that lust almost creates a fog of who that person really is. So I'm not saying don't have sex with your partner. I'm just saying, is that partner really good for you long term? Because I've had plenty of people that I was like emotionally connecting with sexually. And I'm not saying this is you, I'm just saying this was me. I had so many people that I was connecting emotionally, sexually, and then I recognized, wait, this person I don't really see in my life long term. This person isn't capable of truly receiving my authenticity, isn't truly capable of being in my space in a way where I'm happy all the time. This person has a tendency to be very reactive. This person has a tendency to not really be aligned with me and my path, right? So I'm constantly, what I do when I'm celibate is I'm allowing myself to evaluate their character like this. So that way I'm not subscribing to that person long term. I'm not saying sex is bad, but what I'm doing is that the way that I was having sex, it was more in the thinking of one night stands, of how many girls that you can have, the threesomes, the orgies, etc. That was my way of thinking because number one, I'm on the internet watching pickup girl videos. That's how you get programmed. As a child, you just get freaking programmed by all these things. You get brainwashed by all these things, and you're like, shoot, wait, all these ideas aren't actually healthy. Oh, shoot, okay. And you're like, oh man, I already messed up. I already had messed up behaviors. Oh, I can't take that back. All right, I have to own up to it. That's what it is. Okay.
So would you say that in general,
Uh-huh.
at least, porn is detrimental for most people because it can so easily cause addiction?
Yeah, it trained me to objectify people. It trained me to, as a guy, you're constantly rating girls. Oh, is that a girl 1 to 10? Would I have sex with her? Would I not have sex with her? You're not thinking about her emotions. You're not thinking about her story. You're not thinking about what she's been through. You're not thinking about any of that. You're just thinking, would I have sex with her? Would I not have sex with her? And that's what happens is that when you combine what my thinking was, pornography and picking up girls, and you combine that together, that's how you're processing and receiving women. You guys...
Based on like a status, like, oh, she looks just like the people in the porn. I'm gonna have a lot of fun with her. Or,
Exactly.
oh, that lady, oh, she doesn't look like she'd do any good in bed, so I'm just gonna leave her over there.
Exactly, and dudes that go through that process, the saddest thing, I know a dude that's like, oh, I'm gonna pick up girls, and he went down that path. The wife that he has yells at him every single day. It's like walking on eggshells every single day. So when you're thinking, oh, I'm just looking at a girl for their physical appearance and their sexuality and all that stuff, you can't really evaluate, hey, this person has good character. You're just looking about the sex. You're not looking about her character. Like, I know you guys have amazing character because, oh my gosh, I told you my darkest stories and you guys are still like accepting me as a person.
Okay.
I love you guys. Thank you for doing that. I so appreciate, that's amazing character. And that's so loving because it allows people, I know now the next people that you guys go up to, they can truly be vulnerable to you guys. And that's beauty. That is the most valuable thing, but most guys are thinking physical appearance and sexuality, how big it is the most valuable thing. There's a discrepancy.
So would you say it's not possible to have like a sexual relationship and still build an emotional one at the same time? You kind of have to do one before the other, though?
It's more, yeah, for me, it's more like I'm gonna go up. So if I'm in the process of finding a girl or finding a person in my life, I approach a lot of people. You guys see that to some extent. I'm approaching an abundance of people, an infinite amount of people. And then what happens is that when that person comes into my life and I'm truly seeing them for what they are, not for their sexuality, I'm truly just seeing their character, and if they're a person that's truly right for me, then cool, you know what, maybe I'm gonna indulge in my sexuality, because it's nothing wrong to indulge in an ice cream, but it's the attachment to the indulgence in the ice cream. I had an attachment to my sexuality. So there's
a difference between having like a cone of ice cream than having the whole tub of ice cream.
Exactly.
Being able to pace yourself.
Exactly. And what happens is that if you're attached to the ice cream, that's the problem that I had. So there's nothing wrong with indulging. There's nothing wrong with desiring and wanting and needing. What it is that, number one, I had an attachment to it. Let's not be attached to it. And let's explore this area a little bit more on the celibacy thing and seeing if I can find the person that's truly right for my space. And then, you know what, let's just be me. Let's just indulge. Let's just be a human for once in a while, right? So there's nothing wrong about it, but it's just like being on your phone. There's nothing wrong with spending 2 hours on your phone. It's your choice. And it's your choice on how you want to use it. No one's going to tell you otherwise. Exactly. So there's nothing wrong. The biggest thing when I talk about celibacy is like, oh, this is wrong. You're doing something wrong. No, there's nothing wrong. Nothing wrong about it. Yeah. It's your choice. It's how you feel about it. And if you intuitively recognize, oh, I'm kind of unhappy in this realm. Okay, let's maybe go a different route. That's about it. If you're truly cared about your happiness, you'd almost go a different route. Okay. How are you guys feeling?
Yeah, interesting. After you explained a bit more, then it was like, okay, I can see more where this is.
Yeah. Women get this. Men are like resistant, yo.
Like, whoa.
Like no, bro. Like, dude.
Well, I understand, because like I'm a very simple person, so I understand that whole like, what? No, abstaining? What?
Yeah.
But I get the whole idea of like evaluating, okay, is this healthy for me?
Yeah.
Is this healthy for the other person or partners that I'm with?
But here's the thing about abstaining. It's abstaining sounds like unhappiness because the dog's barking you at the whole time. It's like that frustration, right? And you're like, dude, I just need to ease that frustration. So it sounds like torment a little bit, but it's not.
Yeah.
And abstaining, celibacy is there's a difference between abstinence and celibacy. Abstinence is just like you're just not having sex right now, but you're still letting that dog bark at you. Celibacy is a commitment to disciplining that dog. That's the difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. You guys good?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, you guys.